We live in a clown world, and I had to laugh when I saw this story come across my MSN feed. From The Guardian, Biden comes out fighting after report questions his memory. Of course, the report refers to Biden's storing classified documents in various residences, like in his garage. The DOJ says classified Afghanistan war documents were in a badly damaged box in the garage near a collapsed dog crate, a dog bed, a Zappos box, an empty bucket, a broken lamp wrapped with duct tape, potting soil, and synthetic firewood. I don't want to mock Biden here. Aging isn't funny. But The Guardian is. The propaganda starts with the headline, Biden comes out fighting. Another Guardian article describes a fiery speech. You have the strongest picture they could find. So if you only read the first paragraph, Joe Biden came out swinging last night. My memory is fine. You'd have a favorable impression. But the real story comes later. The report actually concludes Biden was guilty, but some jurors wouldn't convict him because he's a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. In other words, his brain was so scrambled, he's not legally responsible. But if Biden's memory is as good as he says it is, then he really should go on trial. But The Guardian never raises that issue. Lies by omission. But the most spectacular error of omission is the end of the press conference, where Biden slowly walks away, appears confused, and comes back to the podium, and after some awkward shuffling, announces that the president of Mexico opened the border to Gaza. And The Guardian left that part out. Stunning.
The conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him.
The Mexico blunder is obvious. Mark Nice exposes many other mistakes, memory lapses, or outright lies in Biden's speech that any decent reporter should have pointed out, but not The Guardian. I'll put a link in the description. Now this cracks me up. The Guardian asking for paid subscriptions to support independent journalism. Because I've covered this story before of Bill Gates spending $300 million to buy off the media. And The Guardian got $13 million, second only to NPR. Gates wrote the book, How to Avoid a Climate Crisis, which outlines dozens of technologies that will be needed to reach net zero carbon. And Bill has investments in nearly all of them. The more media hypes global warming fears, the easier it is for Gates to get massive government grants and more sales of his fake meat and other wares. The Guardian has 13 million reasons to exaggerate climate change in the name of independent journalism. So you get abominations like this. Sea levels are going to rise by at least 20 feet. Harold Wanless doesn't tell us where he got the number of 20 or 30 feet, but says it's all but certain, and it might only take 100 years to get 20 feet. Now there's plenty of fiction here. He talks of all the ocean warming after 1930, but actually the world cooled from the 1940s to the 1970s. In fact, The Guardian itself was warning of an ice age in 1974. Today, oceans are rising about 2 millimeters a year, not 6. Here's a chart from NASA's Earth Observatory website. Here we are today, up a few centimeters from 2000. Here's the worst case scenario using the RCP 8.15 assumptions, which have been wildly inaccurate in the past. Sea level rises less than 4 meters by the year 2300. Now, nobody actually predicted 5 meters. NASA just left this part red to make the graph look more dramatic. The Guardian's 20-foot prediction is about 6.1 meters, which would be above the D, just above the edge of your screen, literally off the chart. Except that The Guardian says this can happen by 2121, 179 years ahead of schedule of the worst case scenario above the X on the chart. Zero credibility. Now that's just one example. This fellow Tony Heller has published entire compilations exposing the Guardian's fake climate fear porn. I'll post a link. My earlier videos about fake news propaganda all showed media outlets that claimed the Great Reset was a conspiracy theory rather than a badly written book by Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum. So I had to see if the Guardian was also covering for Schwab. This one is classic. How the Great Reset of capitalism became an anti-lockdown conspiracy. The headline suggests that all the protesters in the photo are crazy Great Reset conspiracy theorists. But there's no sign in the photo saying anything about any reset. Well, the article says people had Great Reset signs, but how would Quinn know? He wasn't there. He didn't talk to any of the protesters to learn their stories. It's not even a Guardian photo. It's Shutterstock, and the author was an ocean away from the protest. So this is even worse than the BBC, which used a single sign to stereotype the whole crowd, as did the CBC, although the CBC used this photo for 3 different stories. Oh, it's hilarious that The Guardian refers to an airport book by Richard Florida, written 10 years before COVID or lockdowns, but says nothing about COVID-19, The Great Reset, a book that supported all the lockdowns and calls for greater powers for the WHO so someone can order worldwide lockdowns. The Guardian then pretends people are crazy to connect the Great Reset to COVID. Complete gaslighting. In its most implausible version, this conspiracy imagines that a global elite is using COVID-19 as an opportunity to roll out radical policies such as forced vaccinations, digital ID cards, and the renunciation of private property. But that's clearly what happened. No vaccine, you got fired from your job, banned from restaurants and airplanes, and vilified by politicians, the public, and most of all, media outlets like The Guardian. A former UK PM, Tony Blair, a big wig at the WEF, was promoting digital ID months before the Guardian article, and later moved on to vaccine passports and even digital medical libraries, so people in other countries could check your vax records. As for private property, lockdowns forced private businesses to close, family restaurants to shut, and the Canadian government even froze bank accounts of people protesting the vaccine mandates and blocked people from donating their own money to the protest. And as the Great Reset calls for governments to go gung-ho on climate change, we see policies aimed at putting farmers out of business, like forcing Dutch farmers off their land in the name of reducing emissions. And WEF's video saying, "You will own nothing and be happy," tells you what they think about private property. Like NPR and the BBC, The Guardian describes the Great Reset as an initiative by Prince Charles before he became king. They want you to think the reset is a 1 minute 57-second video, rather than a 280-page book. Like NPR, The Guardian likes to attack Fox News, even when Fox is correct. They want you to think Laura Ingraham is a conspiracy theorist for dissing lockdowners for their idea of never let a crisis go to waste. But Schwab literally said that in the book. And he went on to praise the European Commission for deciding not to let the COVID-19 crisis go to waste. The European Green Deal is the reason for all the farmers' protests going on in Europe today. The Guardian objects when Ingram says, powerful people began to use the pandemic as a way to force radical social and economic change. But that's exactly what Justin Trudeau said out loud.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change.
Then The Guardian disputes Ingram's claim that Biden's people believe in the Great Reset, while Biden's climate envoy, John Kerry, talks the talk. Now, before the Guardian article, Kerry had famously spoken at the WEF, saying Americans chose the Great Reset over nationalism. So the Guardian published before Kerry said, the Great Reset will happen at greater speed and intensity than people might imagine. Some conspiracy theory, Guardian. More recently, Kerry plans to cut food production, which would cause poverty and starvation, while Kerry flies around in a private jet. Welcome to the Great Reset. And like all the other stories covered in this video series, this author accuses opponents of the WEF with disinformation. Of course, it's the Guardian spreading disinformation for writing about Great Reset conspiracy theories without ever having read the book or even admitting to its existence, or even talking to a single person that they accuse. And yet again, we see that guilt by association tactic with Donald Trump, as if all these lockdown protesters in Manchester and London, England, just spent 4 years cheerleading a US president who cut taxes too much. So the Guardian follows the playbook, with the 2 minutes of hate against anyone wanting freedom, sending Schwab's book down the memory hole, and hiding Biden's gaffes. Please comment and subscribe, and if you can, support your local food bank.